So you have some stuff on your mind.
Yeah, I mean, the obvious situation right now is Hara having passed away.
Yes.
Yeah. It's always a bit of a weird thing, like, where do you actually, like, what's the first starting point, I guess?
How do you even begin to discuss such a thing?
Yeah.
That's fairly multifaceted.
Mm-hmm.
I guess when I heard about this, especially so close after Sully also passing, it certainly reconfirms a lot of the people my friends who are only casually into K-pop or only just sort of vaguely know about K-pop, how they feel about it. The knowledge of things like slave contracts and poor conditions for workers and stuff like that is reasonably well known now among the general non-K-pop liking population, because there's been sporadic media coverage of those things that's sort of been leaking out through the years, and this sort of incident has obviously played into a lot of people's feelings that, you know, K-pop's just a bad thing. So myself and many others are probably going to get a lot of people saying, why are you still interested in this? Why don't you just give it up and, you know, look for something more, you know, less obviously corrupt. I'm playing devil's advocate here to a degree, but it's something that's going to be coming up for a lot of people. So I'm interested to hear you address that as a starting point.
Yep. Yeah, so I think that's definitely been the main viewpoint of a lot of people when talking about this for, like, the first time. For example, like, I've been in contact with someone who works as a journalist, and they basically said stuff along they basically just said stuff along those lines that's pretty similar in terms of K-pop bad, Hara victim of K-pop, Sully victim of K-pop, Jonghyun victim of K-pop, and it's like, that's very much a tip of the iceberg take, and there's a whole mammoth underneath that iceberg.
Yes, well, Guhara had very specific issues in her life that weren't all related strictly to K-pop itself. I mean, the issues with the abusive ex, issues that any woman can have.
Absolutely. And then the other thing to consider as well is, like, if you look at a pattern, I guess, on who has taken their lives, it starts to emerge that there's something going on in terms of these three people were all quite progressive. So if you look at Jonghyun, he was arguably one of the most outspokenly liberal idols in K-pop probably throughout history. Like, he openly supported transgender students and their rights, and, like, that's definitely not something that's a mainstream opinion in Korea. And then you look at Sully, and she was also in a similar situation in terms of she was very much outspoken on women's rights. And in Hara's situation, she was embodiment of male violence against women. And nobody wanted to confront that with her, because to confront what the population allowed to happen to her and continued to allow to happen to her after she attempted earlier this year would mean that the status quo isn't acceptable. So it was just push her and push her and push her away until she eventually just felt that she couldn't keep living anymore. And it's heartbreaking to see that happen in real time, because as soon as I saw the post earlier this year, this was back when Sully was still alive, like, that she had attempted to take her own life. It was just awful. And I was just thinking, like, why isn't anybody speaking up now that she survived the attempt? And this is obviously this is something that I'm finding upsetting now, is seeing all the celebrity posts on things like, cancelling schedules, showing respect, and that's all well and good, and I appreciate the gesture, and I also understand that as colleagues for some and friends for some, it would be very hard to go to work the next day after losing a close friend. But my frustration in this situation now becomes, why didn't you do anything when she survived that first attempt? Why does it only matter? Why do people's lives only matter when they're not alive anymore and it's too late to change anything? So that's a huge sense of frustration that I'm feeling right now, is the fact that it was super predictable, and I'm now stuck reading all these posts from people saying, oh, it's such a shock. And it's like, it's not shocking to anyone who was following her for a long time.
There is a stereotype with people who do attempt suicide that it's just attention-seeking behaviour and so forth.
Yeah.
And that probably played in a lot of the reactions that people had. But of course, I've always felt that just because someone's seeking attention doesn't necessarily mean that A, they're not going to do it, and B, that they don't have valid reasons for seeking attention. Yes. I mean, Guhara was certainly someone who should have got a lot of attention, and so I don't really think that's a valid reason to, hate on people the way that she was hated on.
It was awful. It was just, it was awful. And I think it's also something that a lot of women will probably have an experience of throughout their life, in terms of maybe not to the extent of what happened to her, and for the sake of anyone who exists, I hope what happened to her never happens to another person. But I'm sure there's situations of women who are being abused or who are being harassed, and they try to come forward about that, and then they're just told they're overreacting. It's so common in society, and it's common, and it's just like, it's frustrating because it's just such a recurring thing, to the point it doesn't shock anyone. But then now that it's so well known, why does no one try to fix it? It's words. I always struggle with words to begin with, and then you get a topic like this, and it's just makes me trying to put a coherent sentence together even more difficult. So I apologize to whoever's the person who transcribes all of these podcast interview things, because yes, they will be extra difficult.
I think they'll be doing all right. But yeah, it's a hard thing to people to process, no matter who you are. And everyone reacts slightly differently. And I'm almost glad to hear you talk about it in a way, because whenever I, like with Sully and with Ladies Code and stuff like that, I've never had the traditional sort of reaction to these sort of things. I tend to mainly just get kind of angry about them. Yeah. And I get that you sort of are much on the same page as me. I mean, you're not in a ball of tears. You're like, there's problems here. Why aren't people trying to sort something out?
Yes.
And I think that's something that I can definitely relate to.
Yeah, in terms of the way that I process emotions, I think it's got a lot to do with, I guess, the genetic makeup that make me as a person. So I've spoken about this on Tata's Instagram page, and I've spoken about it on my private Twitter account. But to anybody who is listening who might not have previously been aware, I've been recently diagnosed as being on the autism spectrum, which to some probably isn't even that much of a shock, given the way that I've communicated throughout my entire internet career, and just the way that I presented myself on TV, which many, many people, even the ones who don't like K-pop at all, just perceive me as being very strange. So I'm not embarrassed by it, and I'm not shocked by it, and it is what it is, but it also helps put a label, I guess, on certain behaviors that other people might not understand. So in a situation like this, when it comes to showing grief, I am very upset. Like, I won't be in tears throughout the course of this interview, but I do have feelings, but I just express feelings in different ways. Like, I literally have a signed picture of Kara that I got years and years ago from a friend who used to work with, like, they were an album retailer, so every now and then they'd get little freebies and things like signed CDs, signed pictures, etc. And they knew me as being a very big fan of Kara, and I bought a lot of Kara things from them, and they passed on a signed photo of Kara that they had received as a gift to me. And I have that photo framed, and it sits on my bedside table, and it's like one of the first things I see every morning, every day. So Kara have been a very, very big part of my life, and to lose someone who was like one of my, I mean, I like them all, so it's not saying she was my favorite, but like she was someone I cared a lot about. And yeah, it's hugely, hugely upsetting.
Yep. You mentioned that you were, in private messages to me, that you were concerned about IU.
Yeah, so IU is like, I'm worried about her, the exact kind of worrying feeling that I had about Hara a few weeks ago. Like, when I was worried about Hara, especially within the last month, I tried to contact her on Instagram, because occasionally idols do read the messages, and I just tried to hope for the best. Unfortunately, she never did read the message that I sent her, trying to be supportive and like letting her know that the fact that she was still alive was just a blessing, and unfortunately, you know, she couldn't continue to stay that way. And the feeling I get when I look at IU now is just so much concern, because she's also a person who's quite progressive by Korean standards. And again, as I mentioned before, that pattern of people who are taking their lives are people who are quite progressive, because it's such a structural problem. And this is, I guess, why I get frustrated with the reports K-pop bad, because it's not just K-pop, it's Korean society as a whole, it's the government ties within K-pop, and how we've got situations like Burning Sun when no one's being prosecuted because people involved in that were involved in the government and the police force and politicians, etc. So it's a system that's obviously been designed to protect the corruption up the top. And IU is someone who she didn't fight that particular system, but she fought against what being an idol should be as a very young person. Like, if you think back to her situation with Eunhyuk, she was 19, he was 26. Who did the public go after? The teenager, not the predatory man. And then her situation with the ZZ cover on her Chatsura album, and the way that he was wearing stockings, and everyone accused her of being a pedophile. And it couldn't possibly be the woman who grew up being sexualized by 30 to 40-year-old men when she was still a teenager, trying to talk about her own experiences of being sexualized as a child. Oh no, she must be a pedophile herself. And she's fought against so much of the stigmas around being an idol. She doesn't hide away from her past. She still performs some of her older songs. I think the new comeback that she just had was, like, one of the songs on the album was written by one of the people who wrote Good Day, or You and I. I'm sorry, I can't remember the exact titles off the top of my head right now, but I know that she continues to still make music in her previous style, but then she now has so much more control over what she does. So she's a symbol of a woman who was very much oppressed by the system and the structures of the industry, but she was able to overcome them, fight back against the public's perception of her, and still continue to live her life and put out new music. And she's just such a beacon and a symbol for so many people of how much you can fight back and can overcome as a woman who was being sabotaged. So I see her as someone who would probably be very affected by these passings. And she is additionally, she was very close with Jonghyun. He wrote songs for her. He wrote songs that were on her Modern Times album. And then she was very, very close with Sully. She wrote the song Peach about her. And then she was also good friends with Hara as well. So if you're losing friends to suicide within a rapid time span of each other, that's mentally draining and exhausting. And there's also studies that have shown that this is not implying that IU has any ideation on doing things. I've never seen anything from her implying she would have, and I hope to God she never does. But if you already have existing ideation and other people around you take their lives, then it drastically increases the risk of you taking your own. And I think that situation obviously just proved itself with Hara and Sully, who were very close, and Sully attempted after Hara's failed attempt, and then Hara attempted again, and now we've lost both of them. So if you're seeing so many people who are very much like yourself that you can identify with, and they're all feeling so overwhelmed that they can't do it anymore and nothing's changing and it's just all hopeless, so why would we continue to exist? I'm just very, very worried for her that she might have those kind of thoughts right now. And obviously I'm not a mind reader, so I can't claim to know that's what she's thinking, but I just can see that she is someone who matches, I guess, the pattern of the people who are being targeted.
Yeah. Well, yeah, Korea's not a very progressive society in general, so it's obvious that people who are more progressive leaning in their beliefs and their attitudes are going to have a harder time fitting in, and they're going to have a harder time navigating popular culture if they're famous, while maintaining any sort of self-expression. There was always a sense, especially with Jong-un, that he wanted to say so much more that he couldn't.
Yeah, and it's like, to, I guess, address another elephant in the room type situation of, like, we're white people, so if we're talking about Korean culture being bad, then that's racist. And it's not necessarily what we're saying, and there's definitely white privilege that comes into play here in terms of it's very easy for us to look down on our high horse and yada, yada, yada. So I'm not trying to say my culture is better, and I want to say that a lot of things that happen in the West are very much like what happens in K-pop, such as the 27 Club is literally an example of that. So I'm not trying to paint the West as a morally superior country. It's just the West has gradually started to make more changes, such as the Me Too movement, and I think that until such time as Korea starts to have the progress in that country where women are able to speak up for themselves, then it's going to be an ongoing issue in this industry. So, like, the situation like right now with Me Too, it's like the women coming forward with that, it's only been the last couple of years that they've actually been able to be taken seriously. So this has been a hugely ongoing issue for years and years and years, decades. And then, like, how do I put it? If you go look at Korea right now and that movie that everyone has been talking about, it's like Born in 1982. I can't remember the name. I think it might be something like Lee Ji-yeon. But yeah, the movie Born in 1982, it was also a book as well. It's very much like, it's a feminist story. And it got review bombed, which is men giving it 1-star reviews without actually even seeing the film. Irene was ridiculed and had photo cards burned and was just treated horribly because she was photographed reading the book, or she had the book in her hand. So it's like, if the West is only able to start progressing with Me Too within the last couple of years, and Korea is still at a point where women can't even read books without being branded as a witch, then it's still going to take more time for progress to happen. And if anything, as beneficiaries of privilege in my country right now, where I can speak these things openly, I feel like I should be trying to at least vocalize these problems for the sake of the women who can't speak for themselves right now without getting the kind of consequences to their career. Like, yeah, as I tried to speak for Hara on my previous account, and if you did happen to be following me, so you probably would have seen a lot of the threads and tweets that I made about her. So yeah, it's just like it's such an overwhelming feeling of powerlessness that you want to try and help the situation, but you're just like one individual in another country who has like no real access to try and make anything change, but you still want to try and help.
I think it's perfectly valid for somebody in culture A to say, well, I think culture B is like this or whatever. I think that's completely fine, and I think that goes both ways. I also think that in terms of privilege, I think it's fine to be privileged. I mean, people tend to use privilege on the internet as a way to shut people down, to say, well, you're privileged, so you can't speak about this because you have privilege. Whereas what I actually think is that, and kind of this ties a lot into what you're saying, is that if you have privilege, then it should really be the opposite. You should be able to speak out.
So I feel like if you have privilege, it's your job to help the people who don't.
Or not even your job necessarily, but at least it's I think it's at least helpful to make observations and to have a bit of dialogue about what's going on, and to have chats like this. I mean, if we were so caught up in our supposed privilege that we decided that we couldn't do a podcast, then all the people listening wouldn't have this content, and they wouldn't be thinking about these issues, maybe not in quite the same way. So that would be a bad thing. So and it's a shame that privilege is often used as a way to just sort of castigate people, but really it should you know, I mean, really, ideally, what we want is for all people to have privilege.
Yes.
And
When I talk about the concept of white privilege and me benefiting from it, I'm not saying I want to have white privilege or I should. White guilt is another thing that often is like the opposite of it. It's like, I have privilege, I'm an awful person, I deserve to be, you know, beaten or whatever. It's not a matter of that for me. It's I want everyone else to have the same benefits that this privilege grants me. So how do I talk about it in a way that we can get that conversation going and everyone can have the same access to #white privilege?
yeah, I mean, you know, there's all sorts of things you can do as someone who, I mean, being white may or may not have anything to do with it, but if you're in a position of power, you can certainly help less powerful people in all sorts of different ways. I mean, I certainly experienced that myself in the music business and also in other businesses that I'm in, where, you know, if I can see that I can help somebody, then I'll try and help them. So, and in those some cases, those people might be of different backgrounds, or they might be, you know, experiencing mental issues or violence, or, you know, etc., etc. So I think those are all good things, and I think people shouldn't, you know, everyone's very negative on social media, but, you know, there's a real positive aspect to privilege. Getting back to IU, when I look at IU and the sort of stuff where she's at career-wise, and I was thinking about this today. I was thinking, you know, she's just lost a couple of people within the space of a month, and I thought, wow, that reminds me of myself a few years ago when I was finally doing really well in my career for the first time in a long time, and a lot of other people around me were either suiciding or succumbing to death through natural causes due to having lived the rock and roll lifestyle a bit too hard in their earlier years. And so when I thought that, I felt like I'm actually not that worried about IU. I think IU will actually, I think she'll be fine. I mean, obviously I could be wrong. I hope I'm not. But I think she's landed in a much better position than both Sully and Hara were in terms of being able to manage her own self-expression.
Yes.
And I think that's what's going to keep her strong, partly. That plus all the lived experience of having had to put up with probably a lot of shit. So, and also seeing it go down with your friends as well. You do learn a lot when, you know, you try to help your friends through tough times, whether you succeed or fail. So, yeah, I hope that she's all right.
Yeah, like, I mean, that is reassuring in a way that it's like someone with that experience that you have with your own life can see logically, I guess, with like an explanation with reason to it as...
I mean, I realise idle images are all fake and stuff like that, but IU is someone who, the way that she can switch it on and off, she strikes me as someone who's got a bit more inner strength and is a bit more driven, and I really don't see her taking her own life. I'd be very surprised. But anyway, that's just my possibly wrong opinion, but hopefully I'm on the money there.
Yeah, like I think of all the things that she has had to deal with throughout her life, and it's one of those kind of things where if she was going to take it, she probably would have during other times that she was going through those.
I think she would have shown some pretty severe symptoms by this point, at least. Yep. If all the bullshit had really started to get to her, and she really hasn't. She's just, you know, been much more steadfast. Speaking of progressive people, I know you wanted to talk about CLC and their progressive music.
Yeah, so, like, I've already known who CLC was for a while. I've had a few songs on my iPod. I've seen a couple of groups do their songs during cover contests, that kind of thing. So I'm not trying to act like I've suddenly just discovered them or whatever. But it was something I was thinking about when I went through their discography the other day, because I've kind of just, like, gone on a massive binge with their music, because I got like one song stuck in my head and then the other one got stuck in my head, and I'm just like, okay, I'm going to loop the same 20 songs for the entire week. That's how this week's been going.
Yeah.
And in some ways it ties in to the topic of progression in music and K-pop as an industry. And I guess something that I'm just vaguely spitballing with here is their song content in a lot of their title tracks is very outspokenly feminist. And I guess this is in an industry which we can clearly see doesn't support that from a lot of artists. So if you look at their title track, so their debut song, Pepe, that was very much like a leave me alone, stop talking to me, go away, you creep. And then their song, Ania, or No O-O, like that song was written back when I think the members of the group were still minors, and it was, the entire song is basically like, this is a grown-ass man, why are you hitting on me, you're disgusting, just because I look like I'm older doesn't mean that it's okay. And then they've had the song Me, which was last year, it's red lip no, high heels no, and then they're saying I like me, I love me, and that's like the English lyrics in the song. So it's very much a self-empowerment anthem, and if you read the Korean translation, it's essentially saying like, I don't want to just be tick the boxes beautiful mold, I want to be I want to be beautiful, and I want to be pretty, and I want to be myself because I'm happy with the image that I see in the mirror. And then they've had 2 songs this year. I think was it called Me Again? It's like, well, I've literally been listening to it all week. How am I missing the song title off the top of my head?
The ones this year were No, Me, and Devil, I think.
Yeah, sorry, No is what I'm thinking of. Red lip no, high heel no. So I've got the title mixed up. But Me is the one that came out this year. And again, it's Adam Dal Me is the hook. It's all about I'm beautiful, I'm pretty, I'm cool, I'm the best. And it's like, yeah, obviously if you're talking about beauty, then perhaps you're being shallow. But it's a nice, empowering message for girls, especially at the age that K-pop listeners tend to be in Korea. That it's, if Korean society is going to put such a strong emphasis on physical appearance, which unfortunately they do, like if you go through a subway station in Korea, there's plastic surgery billboards at pretty much every one of them. So if they are going to place such an emphasis on beauty, then I like the fact that CLC is writing lyrics about beauty being what you want it to be. And, you know, if you look at the success of CLC and other Cube artists, it's rather unfortunate that they don't seem to have the same impact that, say, 4 Minute did at their prime, or that G-Idol, who are the new group coming up, that they seem to be having as well. So I feel like they're unfortunately being quite underrated, and I partially wonder if that's because the public have been put off by the lyrical content of their songs, or whether it's just Cube's shitty management.
I'm going to guess and say it's the second one.
Yeah.
I mean, 2NE1 did quite well for themselves with a similar sort of female empowerment sort of theme with a lot of songs. And they had, you know, rather large amount of success, you know, comparable with Blackpink now. So, I see what you're saying, but I honestly think that the female power lyrics is... Look, I don't think anyone's got any problem with it if it's just lyrics. You know what I mean? It's when it goes. It's when these inconvenient young ladies actually want rights in society. That's when when it translates into some action. That's when people sort of go cold on the idea. But as long as they sing about it, that's fine. So I don't think anyone's got too much of a problem with their singing about it. It's probably just seen as kind of cute by the more sexist individuals. You know what I mean?
Like, aw, she thinks she has rights.
Yeah. We'll show her. You know, so, it's probably just Cube. And, you know, they might only have so much reach. I don't know. I don't even know what really goes on in terms of promotions and stuff like that. But I feel like I've just certainly felt like CLC just over the last couple of years have just had some really, really good songs, and before then they've actually had some songs I really haven't liked at all. So it's just like, why are they only getting the good songs now? You know, they could have given them some better songs earlier on, and that would have helped them out, and maybe they would be at more of a 4 minute level. But then my music taste doesn't necessarily line up with the music taste of others, so that's just maybe what they really needed was to become an R&B group and do music I completely hate, and then they would have been loved by everyone. So who knows? But yeah, I don't think it's the message that's hurting them. I think it's probably other things. I think the message, if anything, is a benefit because they're probably getting a lot of female crossover female fans on board with that stuff. I mean, the male fans are going to like them anyway. But, you know, having that crossover where the girl fans also get into it, like, oh, here's a group they're singing about some stuff I can kind of relate to a bit that doesn't make me feel alienated, that isn't just the usual themes that women sing about, which is usually, you know, I like this boy, but I don't want to say anything. How do I get him to notice me? You know, something a bit stronger is something that a lot of female fans, you know, really resonate with, including yourself, obviously.
Yeah, I mean, even if it isn't just the case of Cube being shit or whatever it is, I feel like it's useful to, I guess, how do I put this into words? I'm thinking in terms of, with all the discussions that get put into K-pop and the lyrical content, and there's a lot of talk about hashtag real artists and real musicians and, oh, this group is female empowerment. I feel like CLC are often overlooked in a lot of these discussions. And from doing the reading and the listening that I've done within the last week, Yen is one of the members. She's the one with the short hair that she went viral a few times. Like, she looks really nice with her short hair. She's been involved with writing a lot of the lyrics for a lot of these newer songs that are coming out. So it's nice to see that they've had a role in their own, I guess, creation of the content that's speaking on their own experiences of being women. So it's like, you know, it's not just them singing a company's prescribed songs, so we're going to market you as feminist, or here's a song written by a man that talks about how hard it is being a woman. It's their own experiences. Yeah. So I appreciate that aspect of it.
Yeah, there seems to be a bit more of that now than there used to be. I remember back in, 7-8 years ago, it was actually quite rare to have the singers write their own lyrics, and now that's starting to happen more and more.
I do remember that too. Like, it's an interesting discussion that you could really have in terms of the people's perception of K-pop and, oh, it's a bad industry, oh, it's toxic, oh, this, nothing ever changes, oh, it's awful. And it's like, change happens, but it happens slowly. Unfortunately, people aren't going to just wake up overnight, suddenly revamping the entire industry within the time span of 24 hours. As the old expression goes, Rome wasn't built in a day. So, like, it's nice when you actually get to a point where you reflect back upon your experiences of being a fan of K-pop, and then you can think to yourself, oh yeah, that's actually different than what it used to be a few years ago.
Yeah, that's true. Gonna hit you with some reader questions now. We have a lot of reader questions.
I feel popular.
And I won't do all of them because some of them are double ups and some of them are things we've discussed already. And there's probably a few troll ones in there, but I might throw those out anyway and give them to us.
I love my fans.
First question is someone wanting us to talk about army/toxic stand culture through the lens of the grievance movement as reflected by this article. And this is the article on deadspin.com called The Future of the Culture Was This Here? And it's Gamergate, which is just basically an overview of the history of the Gamergate movement. And what they're talking about, what this question asker is talking about, is the grievance movement, basically people co-opting the language of grievance to say, well, actually, we're the oppressed ones. And how do you feel that ties into stan culture with K-pop, if it does?
Well, straight away, if you're talking about appropriating language, right off the bat, you've got a lot of people who are co-opting woke terminology and then twisting that to be part of fandom wars. So the main example, I think we've discussed this in the past, is using the term xenophobia. And it's like, you know, a radio DJ not liking one song doesn't necessarily mean he's xenophobic. Sometimes BTS doesn't always have the best title tracks that represent how good they actually are as musicians. Like, the obvious one was the calling Idol construction noise. Like, saying that construction noise isn't xenophobic. That's just not a good song of theirs, by his opinion, and probably by a few others as well. So it's the way that they weaponize movements, terminology, etc., and then just twist it into everything's bad unless it benefits my faves. So yeah,
there's certainly a parallel there between that and the Gamergate movement in general, in terms of how, you know, they're only concerned about ethics in gaming journalism when it's a problem for them. Yes. You know, I mean, if you want to look at ethics in gaming journalism, the biggest, I mean, I noticed it in the 1980s, back when I was reading magazines for Commodore 64 that were reviewed Commodore 64 games. Because I had Commodore 64 when I was growing up, and it was cool. I had all these games for it. And I used to read, there was a magazine called Zap 64. There was another one, I think, that was called Commodore User or something like that. And they'd have reviews. But what became obvious as you read the magazines more and more is that the bigger budget games would always get the better reviews. And even if they weren't that good, they'd get less negative reviews than sort of smaller games. And it was because, and then you'd sort of also see in the same article that they had, you know, this company paid for us to go out and do paintball, you know, and then you sort of put the two and two together and go, oh, okay, well, they've obviously got a bit of a relationship there, so they're writing positive reviews. And that's continued on and on. It's never really stopped. And even until this day, you know, it's not that different to K-pop, where you've got K-pop news sites that are really just press release parroting companies that will just take the press release, lock, stock and barrel, and just shove it out as an article and with very few, if any, modifications. And so, and that sort of coverage has been in the gaming world for a very long time. But Gamergate doesn't give a fuck about that. They only care about, you know, people writing games that cater to women, or I don't know, whatever the fuck, or this person slept with that person, or I don't even know. I've never even followed it that much, but it just seems like the real, you know, gaming journalism has been incredibly biased forever, and it's very, very obvious if you've got a brain, and those people are totally not interested in fighting the real battle. So it's
absolutely. I mean, the biggest example that I can think of straight off the top of my head when you're listing these situations, Billboard. Like, they're pretty much a copy and paste press release website, and everyone will talk about, oh, it's such an honor to be featured on Billboard. I'm like, it's really not that big of a deal, to be honest. And then again with they only seem to care about things when it benefits their own group. The biggest example right now is the Grammys. This year BTS didn't get a nomination, so suddenly the Grammys is awful. And it's like, but people don't seem to understand that this time last year, they were the exact people hyping the Grammys when other artists were the ones trying to vocalize this issue that has been ongoing in the industry for decades. Like, what's his name? Jay-Z won his first Grammy the year he boycotted the ceremony because of how biased and rigged it all is. So it's not overnight that the Grammys have been shit. They've been shit for a long time. But last year when BTS were invited, it's so prestigious, and they're the first artist from K-pop to ever go to the Grammys. Hashtag paved the way. You wish you could. All that generic shit that they just send to spew and spew and spew. But this year, they don't get nominated for their cardboard box, so suddenly it's all bad. It's like, do you fuckwits not realise that last year when they were nominated for their cardboard box? The entire, like, out of the entire list of categories they could have been nominated for, they picked the one thing that didn't even recognise their music in the first place. And then when I pointed that out, again, she's an anti, she's a horrible fan, she wants to sabotage them, you're just jealous you don't have a Grammy. And I'm like, I want them to be recognised, but for starters, I'd like it to be actually for their music. And then the next part was they got invited to present the awards, so that's so prestigious. Did they miss the fact that the whole reason they got that invite was literally like a day or two after Ariana Grande was pulling out of her performance because the organizer for the Grammys was trying to like micromanage every aspect of what she was supposed to be doing on the stage, and so she just pulled out and was like, fuck you, I'm not doing this. and it was like in support again of all the other artists who were also boycotting, not showing up. And then Drake did show up, but then his speech was basically a fuck you to the Grammys. So it's like, this wasn't an underground secret issue. This was something that pretty much everyone else combined was trying to raise their voice about. And then Grammys sees how easily BTS can be used to bury controversies because their fan base will just flood algorithms and put anything positive associated with BTS at the top of search results. So who gets invited to present at the Grammys? BTS. So all of a sudden, all these people who were complicit and actively helping the Grammys bury how corrupt this show is suddenly care about how corrupt the Grammys are. I wonder why. So they're a bunch of fucking idiots. It was exactly just as bad as last year, if not worse, but y'all were very happy to hype it then. So, forgive me for not giving a shit.
If there's one thing the Grammys probably love is a group of young, obedient Korean men who won't make a fuss when they're told what to do, because they get told what to do so often, and that's, their whole life up until this point. So
yeah, it's very sad.
Yeah,
it's like when people hear me talking about these things and being frustrated or being upset or whatever, they always seem to go on this angle that it's like I'm bitter and I'm a hag and I'm jealous of their success or whatever. And it's like, I am upset about these things because I genuinely think they deserve better than being a Grammys cover-up. I think they're better than a cardboard box. I think they're better than being treated as cover-ups for artists involved in other scandals. Like if you look at, Saudi Arabia concert, the hugest one as the example today. Nicki Minaj suddenly featured on Idol, and that was done so she could cover up all the backlash that she was getting for the VMAs. Justin Bieber is getting shit these days because he's a misogynistic pig, like everyone already knew that he was, but he's just exposing himself for it regularly on Instagram and saying Chris Brown beating Rihanna was a hashtag mistake. So he comes out and guess what? He writes a happy birthday Jungkook, let's watch this tweet blow up tweet. And it's just so many people keep using BTS to cover up their own fuck-ups. And the fandom is actively complicit every single time this happens. And then they want to complain. Then they want to act like they're like a woke social justice, speak yourself UNICEF ambassador. It's just, it doesn't add up.
I don't have any more to say on it, so I'll move on. If you were the CEO of TS Entertainment, how would you run the company differently?
Oh, fuck.
Where to start?
Yeah, like literally years ago. Like if you're talking about BAP, you got to go all the way back to like the momentum that group had at their debut and how much potential was just absolutely squandered. So, this is a topic.
BAP was huge back in the
my friend and I discussed this, and they're very vocal on this. And like they firmly believe that if BAP hadn't self-imploded, that BTS might not have blown up to be the level of successful that they are. And it's one of those things we'll obviously never really know, but the way that ARMY seem to think BTS were the pioneers of writing their own music and having socially conscious lyrics, like BAP, they debuted before BTS did, and Bang Yong-guk was an underground rapper, and he is very much another socially progressive type artist who is very much critical and outspokenly so on Korean society. And when they debuted, this was the same year as EXO, so I believe that's 2012, they were obviously in the running against EXO for the Rookie of the Year on fandom Twitter, but everyone got Busker for obvious reasons. That Busker had a huge year in Korea on Melon charts. But the fandom level of popularity was in comparison to EXO. And their popularity was also much more abroad, whereas EXO were very Korean-dominated with a few international fan bases as well. But in New York, I believe, they shut down Times Square over a performance that they did. And they were getting a lot of coverage, and they just had so much potential. And then just whatever the fuck TS did with them, I didn't even know how do you get such a talented group with so much potential and so much going for them, and then screw everything up entirely. Like, what was it? A lot of it was to do with the contract disputes and not paying them the fair share of the wages, which is hardly a shocking concept in K-pop these days, as we're obviously talking about a lot more. But it's like, it's so detrimental to yourself as a business to not be paying the right wages, because it then obviously leads to these contract disputes. So the small amount of money that you're getting from hoarding it from the artists doesn't really last long in the long term as the money you could be generating by having content, happy employees who want to continue working and therefore generating more of an income. It's just, you'd think that would be common sense, but I mean, capitalism.
Well, I don't even know if TS obeyed sensible principles, even from a capitalist, a hyper-capitalist standpoint. I mean, going back to BAP, BAP have, I don't know how many people know this, but they have the most expensive K-pop video ever made, which
which one was this?
Which was One Shot. Yeah, so for those who haven't seen One Shot, it's like, it's like a full action movie with, gunshots and crazy stuff going on. It's like costing about $1 million to do, or the equivalent.
I would argue that possibly Infinite's music video for Destiny was one of the most expensive ones filmed, and it was filmed in Universal Studios or whatever, and I remember that was like over $1 million, I think even close to $2 million.
Might have been trumped by now, but I don't know, I'd have to look it up. But it was freaking expensive anyway. And BAP were actually doing reasonably well at that time, and they were making quite a bit of money back, but the problem is that the label was spending it faster than the group could make it, rather than going slightly lower budget and then giving them some money back. And that's generally, I mean, I've seen that all the time in the West, where people will, unless you've got an absolute mega monster hit, the label will do their best to keep you in debt. By spending more and more on promotions that you don't need, by making the videos bigger and bigger budget, by, driving around everywhere in limos or whatever it takes. There are people in the Western music business, and their attitude is, if my artist is making a profit into their own pocket, it means I'm not doing my job as a promotions person, because that's money I should be using to promote them.
Yes, so Lou Pearlman is the obvious example there.
Oh, yeah, there's a lot of examples, some more known than others, but so, and that was definitely going on with BAP, where they were doing quite well, but their label was obviously trying to make them massive, like let's beat SM, but but they don't really have the capital to do that at that point, so they should have probably waited a bit. I mean, although my biggest beef with TS Entertainment has always been only ever giving Secret one doo-wop song, which was Shy Boy. They never got another Shy Boy.
That's a good song.
One of my fellow DJs over at the radio station is Carmen. She does a show called the Doo-Wop Corner. It's on the same time as my show, but it's Friday instead of Monday. And it's a really cool show. It predates my own show. And I've actually based a little bit of the format of my show on her show. Because even if you don't give a crap about doo-wop or know anything about it, you can still listen to Carmen's Doo-Wop Corner, and you can get a reasonably good feel for the style. And it's also interesting. It's kind of a funny, interesting show. It's kind of quirky. The songs are already short and quick. It's only an hour long. So you hear about 50 different songs per show, because the songs are really quick, and you learn a lot of stuff. And so when I started my show, I thought, I'll do something like that. That'll be cool. And it's not quite like hers, but it's similar. But anyway, when Shy Boy came out, I played it to Carmen because it's doo-wop. They're co-opting the old 50s doo-wop sound. And so I said, you got to hear this. This is a K-pop song, but you'll love it because it's doo-wop sound. And she did hear it, and she thought it was great. And she was playing on a show and saying, this is K-pop, and if you like this sort of style, you can listen to the Monday show and stuff like that. And I was totally bummed out that I never ever got to do that again. I haven't been able to give her another song that she's liked as much as that. because it just isn't one. Nobody does that style. It's something that's past K-pop by. Probably the closest thing to it would be the Barbarettes.
Yeah. I was thinking of a group, and they were the ones who I was trying to think of the name of.
Yeah, but they do more of a kind of they sort of mix it in with blues and gospel a bit, and it's a bit sort of more mellow and kind of folksy. It's not really sort of upbeat, punchy pop sort of style. So, but they're sort of close, but no cigar, I think. But yes, but that for me that was TS's big fuck up that I grew with them for in like 2014. I said this is a shit company, and watch them, they'll fuck up everything else too, and they have. I don't think there's one artist on their label that hasn't sued them.
Yeah, we've got Sonomix suing them, the boy group suing them, Secret has obviously sued them, and BAP has sued them. So like, that's 4 for 4 as far as I know for their artists.
Some other quick questions. There's tons. Some of these we'll go through quite quickly. I had a few on Jeffrey Epstein. Do you think he suicided or was it homicide?
Epstein did not kill himself.
Sorry?
Epstein did not kill himself.
Yeah, you heard it from AustralianSana, folks.
They won't.
I haven't really been following it that much, to be honest. But I think there was, whether he did or he didn't, it's certainly very convenient the way things have worked out, isn't it?
Oh, I mean, the article that you linked me as well, it basically confirms that he got, it's the coroner said the coroner was hired by his brother, basically, like it was an independent person, because all the other people involved with the cover-up would obviously just bring in other people to help them cover it up, so they got someone else to come in, and it was more consistent with choking as opposed to a, like choking through a strangulation rather than from hanging oneself. Yeah. So, yeah, I'm definitely not surprised by that at all. The fact that he had connections to Trump, the fact that he had connections to the royal family, and it was obviously going to implicate a lot of other very powerful people who are still in power. So how convenient that he suddenly died before he could testify when he was ready to sing like a bird.
Next question. Would you vote for Jeb Bush if he was Australian Prime Minister?
No! We don't like Conservatives. We don't like Republicans.
I can't believe someone even asked that. Come on. Jeb Bush is a fucking clown. Next question. Please play the Fuck, Marry, Kill game with the CEOs of YG, SM and JYP.
Can I kill myself? I'm killing myself. That's pretty much.
All right. AustralianSana's not playing. She's already dead.
Yeah.
All right.
How I like it.
I'll play.
Okay.
I'll play, and I think we'll kill Yang Hyun Suk for obvious reasons. I think I'll marry Lee Soo Man because he's got the most money.
Okay.
And Park Jin Young's got the sexiest pants.
Fair enough.
So he's certainly got the most style out of the three. So. Yeah, if I'm, I'm not gay, but if I was going to get fucked by a dude, I want to get fucked by a dude who had a bit of style, probably, was a bit fit, took a shower occasionally, so I'll go for JYP.
I accept that analysis.
Next, what do you think is the cause for the recent influx of right-wing BTS stans? In general, I don't see why they'd get out of BTS's content, which is generally not in line with political figures like Trump, though I don't think it's above question given the Saudi Arabia concert. So what do you think could be a reason why? Many of them don't even really talk about BTS's music as much as just standing them and voting for them on awards shows.
Okay, so I think there's a few different layers to this. I mean, the first one is that One Direction has since, gone off and become soloists, and Twilight used to be a big phase as well, and then that died out. So it's like, it's the next mainstream phase that women and older women that tend to like things that younger teenage girls do live vicariously through. So it's like, there's so many layers to this. How do I get into all of it? Like, BTS's message has obviously been watered down a lot compared to what it used to be at their debut. So they went from being actually outspoken on politics and society to just, love yourself and then everything will work out great because you love yourself and just focus on yourself. And I think the whole focus on yourself message might resonate with certain Republicans because that's all about their perception of their values is it's all independence and self-made and I bootstraps analogies and all that shit. So by loving yourself, it's putting the onus of responsibility upon the individual. So I think that correlates possibly with their values. The other thing that I was thinking about this, because I was weirdly enough thinking about this the other day, is you know how Kanye West has suddenly decided he wants to become an evangelical Christian, and he went to Joel Osteen's megachurch, and suddenly all these white Christians who are notoriously racist and anti-black supporting Kanye West and thinking he's finally seen the light. And a big factor of them all coming around and suddenly appreciating his music is it's this, I'm not a racist, I like a black man. I'm not a racist, I like this group of Asians. It's very tokenistic and it's very performative. So it's done to try and present this image of, yeah, I'm white and I'm a Republican and I vote for policies that put children in cages and export people back to foreign countries that they technically were born in for 4 days but have grown up in America, but they're not real Americans. But I listen to pop music by a black man, and I listen to pop music by a group of Koreans, so therefore I'm not racist. So it's all about making themselves feel better about the fact that the people who they support politically are morally bankrupt. But I'm not morally bankrupt because I vote for them because I like Asians. So it's hugely performative.
Yeah. Well, being a performer is a kind of a traditionally designated place for people of colour to be, if you know what I mean. Mm-hmm. It's that's been the entertainers of the white folks, if you know what I mean. So it's not really any great revolution to to
like music has
even neo-Nazi skinheads like ska.
Yeah.
And that was Jamaican music originally, so yes. But yeah, I mean, I'm not going to comment on the right-wing BTS stands myself because I really don't follow that closely. Mm-hmm. I'll leave it with your observation, I think. Next one. What's your take on this? And this is the incident where the Aboriginal man, the Northern Territory, stabbed a police officer and was shot.
Yeah. So there's conflicting reports about that, whether he actually stabbed someone. There was another report saying he basically hit him with his shoulder or something along those lines as well. The police officer claims that he acted in self-defense, but then there's been conflicting reports again in terms of, was he carrying weapons that weren't lethal? So why didn't he incapacitate him with a taser? Why didn't he incapacitate him with some other method that wasn't going to literally kill him? Like, why didn't you shoot them in the foot? Why didn't you shoot them in the leg? And yeah, this is going to be a huge topic that is just not the kind of thing that we can really even hope to properly cover in such a short time span, because it goes far beyond one isolated incident. Like, if you're comparing statistics of incarceration between Indigenous Australians to white Australians, it's vastly disproportionate compared to the percentage of the population that they make up. So for those who don't know, I believe roughly less than 2% of Australia's population are Aboriginal, yet 100% of incarcerations in the Northern Territory in the juvenile system are Aboriginal. And that's just insane. But it's the system that exists, and it's why so many black people in Australia are disillusioned by the police force, somewhat similar to the situation in America with their own Black Lives Matter movement. Obviously, the political histories between the two are different, but in terms of the context, I guess, they're very, very similar. It's all about white supremacy, and the police force supposedly meant to be for the people, but in reality enacting the government's policies, which are ingrained in white supremacy. So the shooting is tragic. I believe that there's different customs that the culture holds. One of them is to not name his first name. But yes, I'm very sad to hear about what happened. I saw that there were protests that were going on. Unfortunately, I couldn't make one, but I shared the locations on my Facebook page to try and encourage anyone else who might be available to attend. And I know that one close friend of mine actually did go, And the turnout that I saw from her footage was, really great. It's really good to actually see, other people starting to take these issues seriously. And, white people showing up for the black people is important.
Yeah.
Like these are policies that are being made by our elected representatives, even though I did not vote for them. But, if they're going to still be representing the country, then we need to be holding them accountable. And, this goes, again, it's so many layers, because, you're talking about disillusionment between black people and white Australians, and you got to look at how the government that's in power in Australia right now has just been selling off so much of our land, so much of our assets to internationals and foreign corporations and all that horrible kind of shit. And one huge issue has been the river, the Murray-Darling, and how that's just been absolutely drained, and then there's just dead fish for so long, and then you've got black activists who are speaking out against that. And I believe his name is Bruce. I'll just have to see his full name. I can't remember it off the top of my head, but he did a fantastic speech on Q&A recently about the water consumption and how, it forces people off of their lands because they can no longer hunt and they can no longer live off the land the way that their culture has been doing for 60,000 years, because the government is draining all the water and leaving them to die, and their only option is to move. So it's like they're not exactly putting to use a shooting analogy, the way that the government treats these people is not necessarily putting a gun to their head and pulling the trigger themselves, although in this situation it's overtly doing that, and that's why it's gotten such a huge backlash finally. But for pretty much the entire history of the country, it's like locking someone in a room, putting a gun in there and just loading it with bullets and waiting for them to shoot themselves. And then you can say, oh, they killed themselves, when they were the ones who created that environment that forced them and led them to eventually pulling the trigger. And that's essentially the Australian government and its treatment of Aboriginal people. And for anyone who does happen to be listening to this, I highly, highly, highly encourage people to go out and, read academic literature, read blogs, read Twitter accounts, read as much information as you can from the direct source themselves. So I'm just going to Google right now his name, Bruce, ABC Q&A Water, and I can get you his name so that they can go and read his words and, watch his video, because Bruce Shillingsworth. So I highly recommend looking up that name and listening to that man and his speech, because it is very, very powerful, and it's a huge embodiment of why we need to be listening to Aboriginal Australians on how to best manage the country. Because if you look at the bushfires in New South Wales, that's a huge mess, and it's all to do with how the Liberals have been allowing deforestation and how they've been trying to wind back restrictions on mining magnates and all that kind of stuff. And if you look back at the history of protesting, all these kind of movements against mining, against destruction, Aboriginal people are always at the forefront of protests. And it's the same in America as well, with the Dakota Pipeline, and how they were protesting that there were going to be oil spills, and then what happened? The oil did spill. What a shock. And it's always the Aboriginal people or the other people who are in poorer regional communities who are the ones affected when these things inevitably do break. And it's like the rich people at the top are more than happy to come in, bastardize these lands, and then never deal with the consequences, because they don't have to live in the areas that are affected by it. So it's very, very important to watch how these governments treat these people. And it's also important that even if you're a white person, or even if you're a person of class privilege who isn't personally impacted, you need to realize that how someone at the top treats someone at the bottom is exactly how they would treat you if given the opportunity to. So I think that's why people need to care far more about politics than they do, and it's why I'm also personally very angry every time I hear people talk about, oh, politics doesn't affect me and they're both as bad as each other, because they're very, very clearly not, and it's important to listen to these people's voices. It's a bit of rant.
Yeah, the Aboriginal situation in Australia's been really bad for a really long time, and I don't know if it's ever really going to get much better. Certainly the current government doesn't really care, and that's fairly obvious. And I think a large part of the issue is the same reason why Indigenous communities get fucked over all over the world, is that the values that they hold are just not very compatible with the capitalist values and the Western values societies run now or whatever. So certainly the relationship to land is exceptionally different, and that's where a large part of that conflict comes from. And is it ever going to be resolved satisfactorily? Probably not, because you've got two different people with very vastly different ideas about what ownership of land means and what it allows you to do and what you should be doing with it.
I mean, like, even if you're talking about a relationship to land and the conflicting ideologies, like a huge example of this is I can't pronounce the word, I apologize for bastardizing language, but the spell is DJAP or Djap warren trees, the 800-year-old sacred birthing trees that are in Victoria, and the way that the Victorian government wants to demolish them for the sake of a highway. And the highway already exists, and all they could simply move it around the trees, or they could extend the current highway that exists by like an extra lane. And it's like all of this effort to try and destroy something that is sacred for generations for the sake of saving 2 minutes on a drive. They did like a test or whatever it was, or an analysis, and they figured out just how much time this route was going to save by demolishing these trees for 2 fucking minutes. Are you insane?
Yeah, it's pretty crazy.
Yeah, it's awful. It's awful. It's awful to hear how flippantly people talk about things. Like, oh, they're just trees. It's like, okay, well, you don't have that clear connection to land, but why not listen to the people who do and listen to them talk about why it is so meaningful to them? And then maybe you can have some compassion and drive an extra 2 minutes.
Let's move on to the next one.
Yeah.
Your thoughts on what this supposed psychologist is saying about K-pop fans?
Oh, fuck, that thing has been going around for years.
Has it?
Exactly what you were talking about before you even linked that to me. I just thought, what a psychologist thinks about K-pop fans, and they're all so meaningful, and they're all so passionate, and so many people in society look down on them, but I see them for the real leaders that they are. Oh my god. That has been going around since at least 2011.
Oh, wow.
And if anything, there's a specific army account that anyone who follows me would have known that I've called them out before, but they're called like the Psych Perspective, and she is like the embodiment of that meme, but like a Twitter account with 20,000 tweets basically saying that. It's insane. It's like a lot of people who take psychology need a psychologist. That's what I think about that.
Cool. I'd never seen it before, but I thought it was pretty amusing.
You can like link a photo to it in the transcription, or put a picture up in the podcast.
Yeah, I'll put a link somewhere.
Fucking hour podcast. I'm so sorry to anyone who's trying to listen to this. They probably quit by now anyway, so let's just keep going.
Yeah, fuck it. Well, I think we can say what we want at this point. There's no one left. Let's move on. What's the next one? With After School, Cletus kept them in the dungeon until their contracts ran out. Preston, on the other hand, were mostly all released from their contracts early. Why do you think Cletus had a change of mind with how they handle their flop groups?
That is fascinating to me, because I feel like they were completely different in terms of like, well, they're different but the same at the same time. I guess like, why Cletus put Preston into the dungeon when they were on such a strong momentum wave and like winning Rookie of the Year? It baffles me. It really does.
Yeah.
Like, they had 2 comebacks. So, like, how much investment is spent in creating a group? So what was the reason to, like, waste years of putting them together? I just, like,
Come
I
on,
think
Kyla,
it's
tell us.
Yes, Kyla, please.
You're supposed to. You said you were going to spill the fucking tea, and all you said was, "Oh, the tea is that it's the experiences that make it so worthwhile," and just a bunch of fucking Disney shit.
Someone got paid off.
Come on, Kyla.
We want the truth.
No, I don't think she's going to say anything. I think.
I think poor kid's been traumatized enough by the industry that she just wants nothing to do with it anymore. And you can't really blame her when you see the way that so many people are turning out. So it's just, leave her alone. But we also want the truth, but leave her alone.
Yeah, Kyla's all right. I mean, I'm a big fan of Kyla. I mean, she's, young and stuff. I don't expect her to, come out with the smoking gun.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? It's not her responsibility. But at the same time, it is a little bit like, come on. So, good on her. And I hope she's doing well.
Yeah, I mean, did you see the tweet the other day that she posted about she was, like, involved in a goddamn school shooting?
Yeah, she was in a school when it was shot up by someone and some people got killed.
Yeah, that's horrific. Like, she's obviously endured so much with her experience in Korea and, like, the vilification she received for existing as herself on stage as an idol. And now she comes home to America to try and have somewhat of a semblance of a normal life, and the poor kid's involved in a school shooting. Like, her... Oh, God.
I'd want to be homeschooled if I lived in the US. I think I'd leave the house.
Yeah, it's horrible in so many ways. So yeah, it's just, my heart absolutely goes out to her for that kind of trauma that she's had to experience at such a young age. It's not fair, it's not right, and I just wish the world was a better place.
Next question. What's your opinion of Family Guy, and why do you have that opinion?
I don't know, I remember it was a show I used to like when I was 12, 13, so I think the association to that obviously then just becomes it's something I used to like when I was a lot younger and a lot more immature, so I just don't have the same, I guess, interest in it that I used to.
I think it's The Simpsons for dumb people.
Yeah.
If you don't understand the second layer of humour in The Simpsons, but you like Homer going "duh" and stuff like that, then Family Guy's for you. It's
Pretty
like
much.
the dot part exaggerated and all the other stuff either done really badly or not done at all. Mm-hmm. Having said that, my girlfriend really likes Family Guy, and she'll probably hate me for saying this.
I mean, and it's definitely had a history of problematic things going on in the show, but I mean, it's just like, if there's something on in the background when there's no other channels to flick to, it's there, and I know they did that Bubble Pop cover, so that was something.
Here's the next question. Hello, I'm someone who's lurked on your account and followed you when you returned as private, since it's nice to have critical K-pop stands on the timeline. This is referring to you, obviously. My question for you is, what are your thoughts on the increasing trend of idols self-producing? Further, the trend disproportionately favouring male idols, even though many girl group members have expressed wanting to write. Some examples I can think of are Rosé and YG, and more or less all of his female artists, and multiple Luna girls and Jaden Jong.
Yes. Yeah, so if you're going with Rosé, I think she's just an example of so much potential that's just being wasted for no reason. Where is her solo? Her solo was meant to come out already by now. Her solo was being prepared last year, and then by now they supposedly have picked the songs. Where is it? We've been waiting for it for months. We want Rosé solo. The people want Rosé solo. Yes, so I think she's a fantastic artist. I love her to bits. My sorry ass cried when I saw her live. I think she's phenomenal. I loved her voice. Yeah, she can play music, obviously. She can compose. She can play the guitar. She can play the piano. She has a wonderful voice, and I think that she has so much potential to create things as well. I love her covers. I love her style of music that she picks for the covers that she does. Like, it's the kind of genre that I think that she would excel in. So she's got a good ear for music and what suits her voice. But yeah, YG is a meninist, as we all know. For those who aren't currently aware, he has a very ongoing history of forcing the female artists in his company to become ghostwriters on their songs. So he doesn't give them the proper credit that they actually should be listed as. So Jennie and Jisoo have been confirmed to have written their lyrics in their song Stay, but that's not listed on their actual credits. And I think a huge factor on that is just it's a control thing, similar to how you talked about artists being kept in debt by their management. It's also to do with artists just being kept under the thumb of YG and his perception of what he wants them to be. If you listen to I've been supportive of Jennie's solo since that came out last year as well. I really liked the song, and I also really liked the lyrical wordplay that exists between the Korean and the English of the song. So it's very much a balanced song where half of it's in Korean, half of it's in English. And what I liked about it is if you read the translations, it's like the English is saying one thing and then the Korean is saying another. So it's like, and it's a song, I guess, being
back and forth about being devastated about a breakup, but then it's also about being happy and powerful and strong now that you're a solo woman again. And it's like the Korean lyrics in the song tend to be more about like, oh, I'm so sad, oh, I'm so upset, I'm so devastated, and then the English lyrics are, bitch, I'm solo. So I really liked that wordplay. So you got bit none and solo. In Korean sounds like I'm a bright shining solo star, so like I'm coming out better. And then the English is like, bitch, I'm solo, I'm strong, and I can do whatever I want. So it's like two different layers. The Korean and the English both displayed different feelings, and then that came together in that line that's the hook of the song, and it showed it in like one line that was simultaneously both languages. So I thought that was very, very clever. And there was an interview, or it was, I don't know if it was a V Live, but it was something where Jenny herself talked about writing those lyrics, and I thought that was brilliant. So like she absolutely did not get the credit that she deserved for that song when she had a lot more involvement in it than people seem to think she does, or people recognize that she does. And, you know, they have their interviews with Billboard, they have their interviews when they go to America, yet they're never asked about that kind of things. Or if they are asked about it, they have to give like vague skirting answers, and they're not allowed to openly talk about their creative process. And then, of course, you go on Twitter and armies, of all people, and, you know, a bunch of other people who hate them because everyone hates popular girl groups for whatever reason. People hate Twice, people hate G-Friend, people hate Red Velvet, people hate everyone. So the people who hate Blackpink dogpile them for being, oh, she's so fake, she doesn't write any of her music, and these are the people that you send. I'm like, can you pay attention to them beyond the clipped Twitter videos that get put into your feed by people who have an agenda against this group, and then, you know, listen to the stories of them speaking for themselves when you do find those footages, because they have a lot more involvement than the credit that they're given, and they're being suppressed by a horrible management system. So yes, I think it's very corrupt. And yeah, like I mentioned earlier, that I liked Yeon from CLC and how she was personally involved with writing the lyrics of their song. So, you know, it's a woman who is performing her own music, singing of her own experiences, and the group performing them together. I liked that. And then, you know, I'd love to see Luna become more involved in their production. Like, I love the songs that they've put out so far. So, like, this is an interesting thing to me, because on one hand, you know, you don't have to be a self-composing artist to produce good quality music. I'm a definite pop stan. So, like, I love Britney Spears, but Britney Spears hasn't been involved in a majority of her greatest hits. But I still think she's a phenomenal artist, and the ability that she has to take a song and make it her own and showcase an amazing performance is what makes her so good. So that doesn't necessarily mean she has to produce to be an amazing artist. And I think the same can definitely apply to K-pop groups. But what I would want to see is the artists who do have the interest being given the creative freedom to express themselves the same way.
Yep. I'm not going to add to that one. I'll just leave it at that, as that was mainly addressed to yourself anyway. But yeah, it does seem to be mainly guys, and honestly, the guys that I've heard do it haven't really impressed me very much. I've often said, well, you should have just left it to the experts. But anyway, and I don't know if any of the women will necessarily be much better. But yeah, it remains to be seen, I suppose. I mean,
yeah, I think that, like, with a lot of them, a good idea would be to, like, make it the B-sides until they eventually become more competent, and it's then made the title track. Like, I think everyone is, oh, not everyone, sorry. Jonghyun's a huge example of this, and how he had a lot of songs rejected because SM has the standard that if you want to have a song that's self-composed included in your work, it has to be of the same quality that the artists that they bring in as songwriters have. So, like, he originally started out getting rejected, then he kept doing it, didn't take no for an answer, became good enough to have B-sides, became good enough to have title tracks, became good enough that he started writing for other artists on the tier of IU. So I think he's a great example that, you know, practice eventually will make perfect. Yes. So
next, what do you think of very sexual girl group and why not boy group concepts? A group that always comes to my mind is Fiesta and their later sexual concepts with still women empowerment mixed in there. Or underage idols, especially girls in sexy or indirectly sexy concepts.
Yeah, so yeah, that's definitely a bit of a loaded topic. There's a few different avenues you can go there. So you've got Fiesta, who I like quite a few of their songs. I loved One More, like that was a great song. And then I think AOA is another great example of that. And then, like, they're definitely a group that's stereotyped as being sexy. But then if you look at a lot of their performances on Queendom, they showed a lot of different other sides of them as well. And then you've got Stella was another example. Vibrato was one of the songs. Marionette was the huge one that was such a controversy at the time. And you got Brown Eyed Girls, Guyan especially. So it's like, I don't have a problem with it, and a lot of the time the music slaps. So if anything, we want a revival of sexy concepts, please, because it takes bangers.
Yeah.
And the thing that I guess if you're going to bring up, whoever the person questioning us is, if you're going to bring up the minors and the indirect sexy concepts, I'm definitely going to be on the side of preferring the grown women performing them and being overtly sexual than I am seeing a 16-year-old in a skirt that's as short as what AOA's miniskirt is, but it's got pleats on it, so therefore it's innocent.
Yeah, that's pretty much what they do, isn't it?
Yeah, and I think, like, it's very concerning to me when I saw a list that was on Koreaboo, like one of their listicles or whatever, and it got quoted into my feed, and I was just devastated to see it. But it was like top 10 female idols that Korean men in the military go crazy over in 2019. And Wonyoung from Produce 101 is one was included. She's 15, and everyone who knows the military articles and all the shit that they talk about idols for, they only talk about idols that give them strength when they're jacking off. Like, that's what those lists are. And it's disgusting to me that they're doing that over a 15-year-old child. So I would vastly prefer them to not be doing that at all. But if you are going to sexualize women, then it should be with women who are legal, and I want it to be with women who are having creative control and direction over that concept choice. But
yeah, I mean, obviously I don't have any problem with sexualization, but yeah, it's awkward watching stuff like, I don't know, Busters, you know, and it's just like, ooh, it's hard to watch, and especially if you know what they're doing. And I mean, that's why I wrote the whole dog whistle post and stuff like that, which, you know, went viral in various places. And everyone was saying, oh, you're just being a creep, you're just making it up. But no, because the producers actually admitted to it. You had that guy who put together IOI saying, I'm making healthy porn for men. You know, don't you desire your young niece? And he just came out and said it. And I was just like, fucking hell.
He got fired from the next season, and then YG hired him to produce that show that he made. Like, no one thought that was suspicious.
Yeah, and it's just right there, and it's just really, really creepy. But of course, if I point it out, I'm the creep, which is just hilarious to me. It's like, no, I'm trying to make you see it. And it's like, I'm old and disenfranchised by the industry, and I can read things below the surface, so here's an explanation on how this is being run and why the people at the top are doing this. But no, we're disgusting because we can see things happening and are trying to stop them. But, you know, I highly doubt anything we ever do will result in it being stopped, but you'd like to think that a conversation on the topic can at least make more people conscious of it and critical. I think it certainly raised awareness. I know that the articles I wrote about it certainly opened a few people up to it. I mean, also sort of close, like, for everyone who read it and saw, oh wow, I didn't notice that, this is actually happening, this is kind of fucked. There's someone else who read it and just decided to hate me, you know. So,
well, I think a lot of those things, when people start hating you for these articles, I think it's because they realise that they're doing these things and then they don't want to admit that to themselves. So it's much easier to hate the messenger than confront the person in the mirror.
Yeah, and I'm not saying that people are necessarily bad if they like those groups, or, you know, and I'm not saying that if you don't see it that you're dumb or anything like that. Yeah. I mean, look, if you can't see
it's
that,
subliminal. Like, it's subliminal, so it's not overt for a reason.
Yeah, and if you don't see it, then that's a good thing, because it's not really for you anyway. And it just means that you're normal, you know. And the only reason why it's so damn obvious to me is because I've worked in the business, and I've had conversations with people putting together pop acts saying, here's what we're going to do. We're going to get the young person and put them in the skirt and going to do X, Y, and Z. And I know how all that goes down. So,
yeah, like, I mean, this isn't necessarily a unique to K-pop thing either. Like, I'm a huge fan of pop in general, and there was a girl group that existed in America who I loved. Their first album of the group's name was Dream, and they were put together by P. Diddy. All of the members were underage and minors, and they were all in like crop tops and short skirts or tight jeans. And one of their songs, when listening to the album, like the album is like pretty much a whole album that you could just listen to the thing straight from start to finish, and it's all pop hits. I love it. It's just shameless pop, and it's fantastic. But one of the lyrics in one of the songs is like, pull up to the club or whatever. I'm like, you're 15. You wouldn't even be able to get into the club. How are you singing about being in the club? It's just fascinating but terrifying at the same time. It's like this overt need to sexualize children, and it's scary. Like, I want to just listen to my pop music, and they're a great pop band, but why did he have to do that to those children? And that's why they basically broke up, because the members became uncomfortable with just how sexualized they were forced to be as children.
It's like watching children's beauty pageants.
Oh.
That's another terrifying thing.
Love it.
Let's move on before we gross ourselves out too much. Game of Thrones article I linked you. I know you were a big critic of the Game of Thrones plotline. I don't watch the show myself, so I'm going to leave you with this one.
Years of anguish for nothing. It's painful.
All right, that'll probably do as a comment. I think most fans are on the same page there anyway.
I'm so devastated. I'm literally I just turned my head. It's like I'm wailing in agony, and I've got like 5-6 books on my bookshelf that are like the Game of Thrones series, and it's just bastardized. Ugh. Everything about it was awful.
Next one. Random trivia. Did you know that they don't have electric kettles for boiling water in the USA?
What? What the fuck do they use?
They just, I believe they just put the water in a pot, heat up the pot on the stove.
Are you shitting?
No. Well, they have like a kettle, like a kettle they put on the stove. They have electric ones.
Stove. Seem like that in movies and shit, but like, what? I thought that was just like, I mean, I never paid much attention to it. I thought that was just maybe a plot or something in like a movie, and that was just something like, they don't have electric kettle. What the fuck?
Mate.
Do you know how much quicker it is to boil the water in a kettle that's electric?
Maybe,
Why?
I don't know. I've got no idea. Maybe it's maybe the same companies that make the electric kettles also make gun parts, and they can't import both. It's too much money. So the Americans had to pick one.
Like, is it like gas or something? Is gas one of their main electricity sources, the way that Australians use coal? So maybe like they're forcing them to use the gas on the stove to make more money as electricity? I'm just, wow. I think this is like the most shocked I've been about a cultural shame, like a cultural difference, since I found out Canada has milk in bags.
I didn't know that.
yeah. Look up bagged milk in Canada. It's like, I was like, what?
Rightio, that's bizarre.
Yeah.
Here's another couple of questions. What did you dress up for as Halloween, and did you ever go trick or treating in your lifetime? These must be from an American, surely. These questions.
Yeah, so this year, I had work on Halloween, but I decided to dress up a little, like just the hair and the makeup for the sake of being in spirit. Yeah. I was Harley Quinn, so Holly Quinn, Holly. Yes, I was very happy with how that turned out, actually. I got a lot of confidence during the day, so I will probably do that again in the future because I had a lot of fun with it. And then trick-or-treating, not too much, because it's just not really a thing in Australia.
Yeah, we don't do it here.
I did it like once when I was 8, and I dressed... My parents were so cheap. I just wore all the black clothes in my wardrobe, and then they made it like a hat that was pointed out of cardboard, and therefore I was a witch.
Some of my friends trick-or-treated once, but the way they did it is, I think you're supposed to go knocking on everyone's door, but they just knocked on their friends' doors who they knew were coming anyway and had sweets for them. So,
that's cute, because at least you don't get like, especially if they're younger. I'm not sure how old they were, but if you're a kid, so many people that you open the door to be like, oh fuck off, we don't celebrate Halloween, we're not in America. I'm like, dude, that's a 10-year-old in a costume. Do you think they're really going to give a shit about your woke American rants? And then I actually did go, I don't know if it was last year. Yeah, it was last year, because it was, fun fact, the day that Tata Adventures got hashtag exposed as being run by AustralianSana was Halloween, so therefore it's very easy for me to remember the date. So, like, the big distraction from all the fucking shit I was getting, like, literally over 1 million impressions in the time span of, like, 12 hours. Insane. But as a distraction, my friend and I, we took her little brother trick-or-treating. So it was a nice way to get out of the house, go for a walk, be with friends, spend some time with a kid and see how meaningless Twitter is, because you can just see the world from a 10-year-old's eyes. Or not even 10, he's like 7. Yeah. So, yeah, a kid's eyes, and just, things that matter. Yeah. That kind of I've got an experience of trick-or-treating.
Some more questions, some pointless ones mainly. Do you believe in the flat earth theory?
No, I do like science, but thanks for asking.
That's very good. Did you cry when Iron Man died?
Tears were in the eyes, but they didn't quite fall. I think it was like...
I don't even know what this is referring to.
How Avengers Endgame, spoiler alert.
Oh, right, okay. Sorry for the spoilers, everyone.
Yeah, I think if you haven't heard by now, you were under a rock. Get out of the rock.
How do you feel about the United Nations history of raping kids and covering it up since BTS is a UN ambassador?
Oof, I don't know specifically about the United Nations personally raping children, but it wouldn't surprise me.
They provide 4 links. I'll send them to you when you can.
I wouldn't be surprised, because it's basically like, it's the United Nations is a sham. It's essentially what the League of Nations was before World War II happened, and it's just so, again, corrupt, because the people who are in control of it have all the power and all the money, so no one's able to actually speak out against them or protest against them. So you're looking at Russia, China, and America as the biggest of the three in terms of their power involved. So, like, the United Nations ruled against George Bush's invasion of Iraq, and did that stop him? No. And has he faced any consequences, or has America faced any consequences? No. So, that itself just shows how much of a piece of shit the United Nations actually are, because they've never done anything to stop George Bush and then punish him for his actions. He should be tried in The Hague for war crimes. He killed, and the other administrations that continued his war are responsible for, like, 400,000 civilian deaths. Like, that's genocide. Like, and he got away, and there's never been any consequences for it. So, what good is this United Nations if they're not actually protecting the people they were supposedly established to protect? Instead, it's just become a platform for billionaire countries to come along and buy everyone's loyalty. Like, what the fuck was it with Saudi Arabia becoming, being put into the Human Rights Council? And there was like a women's rights council, and like they're apparently allowed to sit on that as they execute people for being gay.
Apparently, someone else just let us know that Saudi Arabia had their first female wrestling game.
Oh, really?
Yeah. I'll send you a link to that too.
Cool. Well, I mean, I'm a fan of wrestling vaguely. Like, I'm not super into it, but I've got a good friend of mine who's very into New Japan Pro Wrestling. So whenever I hang out with them, I watch it at their house, usually, because it's pretty regular. It's on, like, every couple of days. So most of the times I've been at their place, I watch it with them. I've become a fan of Zack Sabre Jr. He is a socialist. So I'm like, we stand the socialist king of wrestling. And then I also enjoyed other wrestlers as well. Tanahashi, someone I've come to know. So I'm enjoying the process of, like, when you're becoming exposed to a new hobby and you're, like, learning everyone's names and you're learning the history behind it. That's me in New Japan right now. So I'm like, yes, finally something for me to deep dive into that isn't K-pop. I'm very happy right now. So I'm enjoying that. And then I've heard about AEW, All Elite Wrestling. So I'm becoming interested in that, because it's basically created by Cody Rhodes and others as a response to the WWE, and how they've basically become this, like, singular authority of American wrestling ever since they took over WCW years ago, and it's just gradually gone down and down and down because of Vince McMahon and his power trips. So, like, Vince McMahon and Triple H, they've sent the WWE off to Saudi Arabia for Crown Jewel or whatever pay-per-view event that they held over in that country, and one of the major stipulations of holding that pay-per-view that the Saudi government imposed was no women wrestlers were allowed. So that's interesting to see that a women's match was held. Whether it was by the WWE, I'm not sure, but there we go. There we go.
I'll send you the thing so you can check it out. What else we got? Do you not have fan cams of the podcast because you don't want to be seen wearing a traditional Australian clothing like cork hats?
I'm sitting here in a kangaroo onesie as we speak.
There you go. Some more quick ones. Since AustralianSana posted endless Pepe Frog memes on Twitter during the 2016 US election year, is she a bigger edgelord than Kpopalypse?
Perhaps. So I like to think that I posted Pepe memes ironically, in terms of how, like, everyone was claiming that it was becoming a symbol for the right, whereas the actual creator of Pepe the Frog himself has personally come out against that and said that he's disgusted.
Yeah, I know he's quite horrified by the way his frog's been co-opted.
If the creator of Pepe himself says it's not a racist meme, then I'm going to help him reclaim his Pepes.
Cool, good work. Holly, do you care at all that Kpopalypse is a massive pervert who blogs about anime porn games?
I mean, like, we've discussed this a bit in terms of the idea that, you know, you're a massive pervert, and a lot of it is actually, like, performative for the sake of comedy / social criticism / I mean, you are a bit, but I mean, at least you admit it.
You know, everyone has, you know, sexual preferences and stuff like that, and, you know, I don't, you know, and yeah, I mean, my girlfriend knows I'm a pervert too, and she's fine with it, so it's, you know, we all like certain things, and you like certain things, and that's fine. I think it's fine to say, you know, I'm a straight guy, and I like, you know, drawings of girls with boobs, or whatever, or whatever it happens to be, you know, just like it's fine to say I'm gay and I like guys, or whatever, you know. I don't think people should be ashamed about sexual stuff, and I know it bothers some people that I talk about.
The line of, like, people should be ashamed of stuff when it starts involving minors and subliminal messaging.
I mean, you know, there is a time for shame, of course, and there's a time to say, okay, there's a point I won't go beyond, but, you know, if it's something that's harmless, then so what? Why does anyone even care? And a lot of my more sexual writing is, you know, part of it's performative, but part of it's also just to say, well, this is just normal. You know, objectification is just part of the game of media, and it's not necessarily good or bad. It's not bad until someone makes it bad by doing something bad with it. You know, if you're using it, you know, if you're being forced to do something you don't want to do, or, you know, or you're pushing people into stuff before they're ready, then that's different. And that's a different kettle of fish to, you know, being complicit and quite happy to go to, you know, do whatever it is that you're going to do. So it's not, you know, it's not a cut and dried thing. There's various levels.
Yep. Remember, kids, consent is important.
Yes. So there's all of that. But
I think that answers that question.
Silly law. So they haven't put a question in.
I know,
but we know what it means, and I guess the implied question is, do you think it's a good idea?
I think it's terrible, and I think it's basically the government trying to sneak in legislation that benefits them under the guise of being about Sully's passing, when it's really their own benefit, and trying to sneak something through. And I think that's, you know, disgusting. Yeah. The way that they're giving her death. It's awful.
Yeah, I mean, I think that, you know, I get why a lot of people like the idea of, you know, having full names on comments and stuff like that. But to me, that's not really addressing the root problem. So, therefore, it's a bit of...
And it's basically going to make it so easy for the government to identify political protesters and then being able to trace them, and potentially, if there's, you know, you look at what happens in China and the way that their internet is monitored, or you look at the recent history of Saudi Arabia's involvement in Twitter and how much of a percentage of the shares that they own. They own more than Jack does. So they own more of Twitter than the CEO of Twitter does. And they were able to get data out of Twitter on people who were being outspoken against their regime. And you don't know how many people like that have now become put in jail because they protested the Saudi government on Twitter. But then you got armies going, well, you should let Saudis speak for themselves about the concept. Gee, maybe if they could actually do so without getting imprisoned, then maybe I wouldn't have to be vocal about this. But
yeah, I agree on silly law. It's just not, you know, it's not really going to... I mean, it's not like people don't troll each other on Facebook. You got your full name there, you know what I mean? So I think it's going to help. The last few questions are a bit more in depth. since Source Music was bought out by Big Clip Entertainment, their words, have you observed any changes in how G-Friend is sold?
Well, they actually haven't had a comeback yet since that's happened, so I think it's going to...
Remains to be seen.
Yeah, remains to be seen. To be continued.
Right, next one. I don't know if both of you have followed this issue, but what are your thoughts about what happened with Super M's number one? BTS's fandom, and probably their executives, has managed to kick up a fuss about it, and some K-pop journalists and publications have fanned the flames. Do you think their sales are legit? And since you both keep a blog, what do you both think of these journalists? Are they following the rules of journalism, or are they just putting out stuff for clicks, expecting that nobody will call them out? Is it a xenophobic attitude to have, that which only allows a token minority to thrive and hopes that the others perish? What can we do to attract more credible journalists to the genre?
Interesting. So, we did talk about this last time, and you gave that really good response on how we're not even actually able to have the real conversation here, which is on the way that bulk buying, the bulk buying, what's it called? The discounts, the way that they sold the albums, actually.
Yeah, package deal was part of the ticket. Because the artists make no money from that. They actually get penalised. So, if you bundles is nothing to brag about, folks. It's a bad deal. That's why they do it.
So it's beneficiary far more for SM than it is for the actual members of Super M, and they're probably non-existent bank accounts because all the money was therefore spent on paying off the bundle deal. But in terms of the number one itself, the fact is it's legitimate, and it's not just Super M that's done bundle deals before. There's been many other artists that have done bundles and gotten chart certifications as a result of that. If you look at Nicki Minaj, she tried to do bundle deals on her last album when I think she wanted the number one for it. I'm not sure if she ended up getting it. The album was Queen, but she was doing bundle deals as part of her tour at the time. The artist who was against Super M for the number one that week, I believe, was Summer Walker, and she was doing bundle deals to try and compete with their bundle deals. So, it's like if others are doing bundles, then it's very interesting to see that only Super M are the ones being vilified for it. Then if you're talking about the journalists, and I use that term in inverted commas, for starters, they're fucking BuzzFeed journalists, so, to call that journalism is like calling McDonald's fine dining.
Yeah, didn't they have, about 5 corrections on that Super M article?
3.
Only 3, oh my god.
Only 3.
Only 3 fuck-ups.
People had to come out with, 2 articles, if not more, and then repeatedly posted that article to say, no, the chart was calculated properly, that's a lie. But, they never retracted that article. They just put the little annotations at the end and then never addressed it again. And then, it's interesting that there was another one. I can't remember her name, but it's Go Away with Jay, I think is the Twitter user at. And, of course, she was another one who kind of joined in on the army support, and TXT, I always get confused on who they're hating these days. Super M was, Super M bad, army's good, BTS only good people in America. She jumped in on that bandwagon. And then one of my friends, I believe someone was shocked that I'm friends with him. His name's Enzo. So someone in the comments was like, she's friends with Enzo? Yes, I am. And the way that she just basically doxed the shit out of him because his 50 followers quoted her tweet saying, where the fuck was this energy when BTS were performing in Saudi Arabia? So, you can criticize Super M for going to America and having a charting album, but you can't criticize BTS for performing at the request of an authoritarian regime. And, her response was, he called me a hag and he looks like this, and she dug through his Twitter. So she would have had to have scrolled back through his history because the selfie wasn't this recent. And I believe I already talked about this, so we're just repeating a bit of history here. But, she's encouraging doxing of people who dare to criticize her authority. It's that's not journalism, that's narcissism. And people seem to think that just because they've got a blue tick next to their name that their hot takes are suddenly so much more valid. But essentially all armies have done for themselves is just create this massive echo chamber that does them no favours, and then they cry when they don't get a Grammy. And it's you don't think that people in the industry see this? And they want nothing to do with it because there's no room for valid criticism or valid opinions. It's all about just repeat the same thing everyone else says, and how funny that the people who are saying these opinions also have a link to buy their book on BTS. No, they couldn't possibly be using the fan base to boost their own profits or sales. No, they're just really genuine people. Ugh.
Just the about the key question there about whether the sales are legit or whatever. I mean, you should never take charts very literally, generally speaking. But the other thing to keep in mind is that it's actually not that hard to get a number one. In terms of, you don't actually have to sell that much to do it. You just have to have be a slow week and you can be a number one. It's the people who are making money are the ones who stay up there. If they're staying up there, then you've got a hit. But
yeah, like, regardless, I don't personally like her music, but I think the more I learn about her as a person, she seems quite nice. But Billie Eilish is the huge example of that. Like, her album has been such a massive success. Even though I don't actually like any of the songs on it, I can at least acknowledge success when it's there.
At least in terms of physical product, what a lot of people don't realise when it comes to physical product charts is that what counts as a sale is not when you, the consumer, buy the album. That has no bearing on the chart whatsoever. What counts as a sale is when the retailer buys the album from the distributor.
Yeah, that's when you get all those K-pop stans who are like, they sent out 200,000 albums, they've sold so many. And it's like, that's not the albums that have actually been sold, that's the albums that have been bought by retailers.
In like the early 90s, I think it was Michael Jackson who came out with it's like a double CD called History, which is always, greatest hits up until that point. And it was like number one with a bullet everywhere in the world at the same time. It broke some record at the time, I think, like that. And then, but like a year later, that same double CD was in the bargain bins everywhere. Because it just went off the charts almost as quickly as it came on. And whenever you see that sort of flash in the pan, it's a big hit and then it's not. What's happened is that the retailers have bought a whole ton of the album from the distributors thinking, oh, this is going to be a massive hit. And then that album sits on the shelves and it doesn't sell to the public. And that's what happened with that album because every Michael Jackson fan already had Bad, they already had Thriller, they already had Dangerous, they already had Off the Wall, so they didn't need this extra album which had like one extra track on it, which is kind of crap, and just all the other songs, the songs they already had. So it didn't really sell that many to the public at all because it was fairly redundant, but that was like, in inverted commas, a number one smash or whatever. And they can still use that as promo and say, oh, their last album was a number one smash, but really, it was actually a flop. So you can actually have a number one record and fail. It's very easy to do.
Yeah. There's a completely different side note. I just want to point out that I've noticed that my microphone at one point wasn't actually connected, so whilst you would have been hearing me, it would have been like the external camera from my laptop and not the actual microphone that I've got plugged in. So I've just fixed that, and if my voice quality suddenly sounds so much better, that is why.
You changed about the 30-minute mark in this. I think your audio changed drastically. So,
Shit.
But it didn't get worse. I think it actually improved a bit. So I think you went from bad to slightly better, and now you're sounding really good. Anyway, it doesn't matter. You can hear you clearly all the way through, so it's no big deal.
Technical difficulties. We're learning.
Okay, we'll just try and do the last ones quickly because we've been doing this for a while.
Yeah, well, we're going 3-hour podcast.
Yeah, maybe the poor person who's got to write this up. Jesus Christ. That sucks to be you.
They're just going to protest and not do
They're
it.
going to give up after this one. They're going to be like, oh,
they're just going to be like, fuck you, we're done.
I agreed to do this. Fuck this. Anyway, okay, so next one is really directed at you. I've noticed that while you have your clique on Twitter, very few people managed to speak up about the Saudi concert, and they were drowned out by the fandom. Why do you think this happened? Do you think it's a matter of political ignorance? And why do you think a group such as BTS, who are marketed as UNICEF ambassadors and who have protested against their own government, has managed to attract such an ignorant, narrow-minded fan base? We've kind of already covered the answer to this, haven't we?
Pretty much.
Do you think it's intentional with the price of fame? But lots of massively popular people who wanted to see them perform have been called out even by their fan base, see Nicki Minaj. So why were armies so silent on that day?
Yeah, well, I mean, it's to do with how rapidly the fan base is growing as well. So, like, you've just had this influx of fans over such a short period of time that if you imagine this going on like 3 years ago, it would have been almost a completely different outcome, I genuinely think. It's just ever since they went overseas to America, and then they changed their concept to adapt to the American market. And, like, of course, you're going to get people flooding this saying, no, they didn't. They stayed exactly as authentic and how they used to be. And it's like, you look at the fucking album credits and the lists of all the names that now exist on all their songs. It's clearly not the same as what it used to be when it was predominantly made by an in-house team. Yeah, so with my quote little clique, for the record, I do try to make sure that I socialize with as many people who talk to me. So it just seems to me that more like the same people messaged me or interact on my ats, whatever, and that's just who I ended up becoming friends with just because they spoke to me the most. Obviously that's a little bit more different now as well, now that I'm a private account. So yeah, it's like most of the time I'm pretty easy to talk to, kind of. Just don't be an absolute ignorant piece of shit and I'll probably treat you with respect. Maybe.
A related note is, how can people follow you? So I'll just respond that if I know you're on private, so if you do want to follow AustralianSana, just DM me. I've already had a few people do it, and what I'll do is then I'll just send it over to you and say, do you want to greenlight this person?
Yeah. Cool, yeah, so like the main thing that I look at if people are requesting to follow my account, I've still got a few in pending and a few just rejected, because I look at who the account requesting me also follows, and like if I scroll through and there's like 50 people I've got blocked and like one person who I'm following in that list, odds are they're probably someone who's trying to like lurk in my account and then go report back to their group chat or whatever. So like I'm not interested in like being hashtag exposed, or like, you know, y'all wanted to bully me off the website, you did that. Y'all wanted to like make me a private account with no influence, you did that. And then like, guess what, issues still exist. You know, I'm kind of like waiting for the day when people realize that I'm not this secret mastermind pulling all the strings and orchestrating everything that's happening. It's more like I'm the voice that was trying to like help warn people about these things so we could fix it before it became a fucking issue. Like, I mean, look at how everyone now has suddenly decided that it's acceptable to ask Big Hit for subs. People like me and my clique have been asking for that for like over a year, if not longer, and we've been openly critical about that for a very long time, and we got fucking dragged to filth for it. People saying shit like, oh, they only do it so that people can create a bond between the Korean fans and the international fans. And I'm like, no, all that happens is certain translators, cough JLK Diamond or whoever the fuck she is, and Modu Borahe, just put their own agenda into the translations and no one exists to correct them. So that's just biased fans spreading a biased agenda and people having no other form of information to counter that point of view. So there should be an official translation so that people can actually get it straight from the source. But yeah, we're antis the same.
yes.
As usual.
Yeah.
Acceptable to say that we don't want BTS to have mediocre Western collabs. Remember when I got fucking dragged to filth for that? Imagine wanting the group that you became a fan of because they self-compose their own music to continue to self-compose their own music.
Well, you just got dragged because people don't like you for other, you know, they see one thing and so everything else is within that lens, but then they get it from somebody else and they're like, oh wow, I've never thought about it that way. Oh.
Yeah. I feel like I've got such a polarizing personality, and the far more majority of people tend to go on the disliking me side of things. It's like, you know, maybe when I was 12 that was devastating, but I guess as an adult I'm not going to adapt to try and fit in with the mainstream, especially when I'm quite literally like on the autism spectrum, so that's probably like impossible for me to ever actually fit in with people. It's like, I don't know, it's like taking off your glasses and then being expected to somehow suddenly see out of your eyes if you try really hard enough. It's like, you know, it's just never going to happen, so I've accepted the fact that I'm blind socially and literally out of
So how do you think we can improve the BDS fandom? This person is saying, I've liked them since debut, but it seems the fandom culture's just gone stale and there's no return from it. Do you think we need to wait for toxic people to get tired of them and move on to their next interest? It seems that for some, especially the ones who are above 30s and seem to spend their whole time on Twitter telling others what to do and what to think, in brackets, it's clear who I'm referring to by now, unknowingly using this as some form of therapy to make up for something that's obviously missing from their lives.
Okay, the microphone just fucked up again.
That's all right, I could hear you.
Yeah, it's weird. It's just like the little light goes out and then I have to like unplug it and then replug it back in again. I got no idea what's going on. Anyway, back to that topic. Yeah, so to people who are obviously dealing with this situation and like feeling uncomfortable in a fandom, like you are under no obligation to have to remain in something that is clearly existing to be a hobby. So, like, I'm not trying to force anyone out of the fandom, but I'm trying to encourage people to say, like, don't force yourself to stay. Because at the end of the day, like, your worth as an individual person and your morals and your self, like, your actual mental health, it takes the priority over all of that. So you're not a bad fan if you walk away from something because the experience is no longer bringing you joy. These are hobbies. We are the paying customers. We should be able to voice opinions of things that we are investing our money into. By business definitions, we are quite literally stakeholders because we hold a stake in the company by giving them money and we expect a product in return. Like, it's basic business. We get product in return. And when those products don't meet the customer demand, then it's a faulty product. But for some reason, being in a fandom has convinced people that our job as consumers is to just shut up and take whatever is given to us and be grateful. And it's like, no. That's not how things should actually work. And if you think that's how authorities should operate, I highly recommend getting your head checked. And that probably is, again, no surprise why those people with those opinions are Republicans. But, you know, BTS just had to go to America, just had to go to the BMAs. I hope selling their souls was worth it. So for anyone who is, like, in that side of things, like, I'm on the fence in terms of, like, I've managed to find a niche group of people who share similar point of views that I do. Some things I don't agree with, they don't agree with mine, but at the end of the day, we can at least respect each other for the sense that we're people who I guess have been ostracized for being outspokenly critical at times. For me, I have this little daydream, and I always wonder what music they would have created if they didn't get that BBMA nomination and decided to like change so much of their concept. So back, like, Boy Meets Evil, from the look of it, started to be like a whole new era, and that was the direction that they were starting to go in, and it looked like that was going to be the follow-up, and like, what happens after Jin kissed the statue? And then we got Spring Day, which was kind of like a bit of a standalone, and Not Today as well. They were like the extra tracks to sell the new album. But I was super interested to kind of see where this grown, mature, manly, I guess, concept was going to go. And then it was just like, it feels like they reverted so much after they got that BBMA nomination. And then suddenly they met all those American celebrities. And then, you know, fuck the creative direction that they were going in. Let's just meet with the Chainsmokers, because, yeah, that's fucking great music.
Yes.
Yeah, so for me, my kind of interest in them still remains, and I guess I'm like holding out to see like when all the glitz and the gold has faded and the next new thing comes along, and people will claim that like, oh, I'm never going to lose interest, I'm going to be here until the end. It's like, you know, look at the Backstreet Boys now, what, 10, 20 years on after the 90s, and obviously they still don't have the same fan base numbers that they did 10, 20 years ago, so it will inevitably happen with BTS too. So when that huge number inevitably starts to drop, I'd like to think that they would hopefully go back to the kind of music that they once were making, and I'll get to see a kind of concept out of them that I was originally hoping for as the follow-up for Wings. But then again, like, given all the shit that they are personally dealing with, so when I'm outspokenly critical on things that are to do with BTS, it's not really them as individuals, but more so the government that is hugely involved in controlling a lot of decisions, such as the Saudi concert, and also Big Hit as a company's willingness to go along with that because money. I'm totally fine if any member of BTS ever actually decides to leave the group. I'm not actively willing it, saying like, Taehyung, leave the band, Taehyung, go solo. But, you know, if he does, I'm not going to cry about it because, you know, they all have individual hopes and dreams, be it their own careers in terms of acting, composing, photography, fashion, etc. They all have individual talents, and I think they're such a well-rounded, talented group that any member of them could have their own individual career if they so wished. And it's been actively suppressed by their CEO. Like, he says it himself in a Time interview that he's asked about their solo projects, and he literally calls it a liability. Like, do you not fucking realise that this is the group that is entirely responsible for your massive bank account, where he has $700 million supposedly, and each member has between $8 and $12 million. So, you know, I'm not going to lose sleep shedding a tear over the rich, because no matter who the poorest member of the group is, they've got more money than I will ever see in my lifetime. But, you know, that's hardly a proportionate share of who's doing all the work. So, you know, if they were to get out of underneath his thumb, I'd be happy for them. I don't want BTS to disband, because I do enjoy them as a group. I like the way they interact with each other. Like, I love the fact that, you know, if you're going to use ships, if I'm discussing them, I don't mean it romantically, but I like the friendships, relationships, brotherhood, etc., whatever people want to perceive it as being. I love the fact that each member could have a ship with any other member of the group, and none of them are really awkward. Like, you know, if I were to do that with Infinite, there were definitely awkward people within the group. But with BTS, it just seems like they genuinely do have a good connection with each other. So, you know, like, as long as that exists, I hope they stay together as long as they're all happy. But if any of them does prioritize their own mental health, well-being, career, whatever reason, there's valid reasons for them to do that. So I would also support that decision too. So I guess it's all about thinking about what you want to see in the future, and do you think it's realistic, and do you see yourself holding out for that, and is it worth putting up with the shit that is the fandom now to actually see that outcome? So that's also kind of like why I'm interested in New Japan Pro Wrestling these days, because, you know, get another hobby on the side.
Yeah, don't put all your eggs in one basket. It's a good idea. Yeah, always. And I mean, I've never been involved in fandoms myself. Even, you know, there's groups I've thought, well, they've got better songs than other groups, but I think at one point I did try and get a bit active on Tiara de Atom, but I might have posted about, which is a Tiara forum or whatever. But I think I took one look at it and thought, it's just too much craziness and too much sun shines out of everyone's ass. You know, so no, I'll conflict with these people. It's just going to be too much. And at one point, one of the people who was admin of Tiara de Atom did ask me if I wanted to write for them, and I said no, it's probably not a good idea, because I wouldn't be able to write the sort of content that, you know, would please people. They'd get upset.
Similar kind of concept to that. Like, I briefly, I guess, dabbled in journalism when it came to music. Like, I managed to get press passes to a couple of things. I went to a couple of concerts, took a couple of photos, and for me, I love photography. So, like, you know, if anyone's listening out there that is still listening after the 2-hour mark and happens to work in journalism and has a spare press pass that I could tag along with and take photos for, by all means, feel free to request me via Kpopalypse's DMs. But I saw firsthand how absolutely morally bankrupt that all was, and how much it's just basically a PR machine of copy and paste as opposed to actual investigative journalism. You know, that's why I laugh anytime I see Jeff Benjamin.
No, it's the last thing they want.
Yeah, that's why I laugh anytime Jeff Benjamin refers to himself as a serious journalist. I'm like, okay, where's the article about Burning Sun, Top? You know, what are you actually doing to, you know, bring attention to all these issues in K-pop that you will highlight whenever idol unfortunately passes away? But they essentially enable the system that allows that to happen. So so like, in terms of, I get what you're saying, like, you have the interest and you like this thing, but you can't talk about it in such a blind head up your own ass kind of way.
It's, you know, there's got to be some sort of rationality to it, and some sort of ability to say, well, okay, they're human, they can fuck up, and they're also quite possibly able to do songs that are complete shit. I mean, one of my on my worst list last year, number 3 was Hyomin. And, you know, and if I was a Tiara fandom person...
Oh, you're getting kicked out of Diadem for that.
I'd be crucified for that. But, you know, if I don't like a song, I'm not going to sit there and fucking force myself to like it just because...
Yeah, it's weird how many people actively engage in brainwashing themselves. Like, what do you gain?
Yes.
Social acceptance, apparently.
It just shows to me that a lot of people don't really care about the music, because if they can put that musical opinion to one side, and then, you know, maybe if you're not really that into music, maybe that's an easy thing to do. I don't know, but for me, I'm in for the music before anything else. So the music has to be good, or I'm just out. So. And that's just the bottom line. I'll leave you with, look, best question, I've saved the best question to last, and I've just put it up on your on the Skype chat. This is an article. Saudi authorities closed down a shop selling traditional camel urine drinks after discovering the owner had been filling the bottles with his own bodily waste. So they just want our thoughts on this article.
Gagging noise.
So
there's multiple layers to that, really. Like, you've got people voluntarily drinking urine in the first place, but then it suddenly would become disgusting to them when they find out it's not a camel's, it's a man's. I like that part of it, really. It's like, wait a minute, this camel piss is actually man piss?
So there you go. Thanks for doing the chat. Thanks for doing this part of the series once again. Really appreciate it. Thanks for your time. It's been a long haul doing this one. Next one.
Yeah, it has been a while. 2 hours I think we're clocking in at. So, if anyone's still listening at the end of that, then kudos to them for soldiering on through all of that rambling and my mic issues.
All good. I'll see you next time, and just drop questions. Anyone who wants to do questions for this, just put them in the box. They can be about anything, K-pop or not. It doesn't have to be about BTS. It doesn't have to be about anything in particular. Just, put them in there and we'll probably get to them. There's a couple I missed out, but they were just kind of repeats of things we'd already covered. So,
that's fair.
So, but if you just put stuff in and we'll talk about it. So thanks very much, and I'll see you next time. No worries.
Thank you.